Okay, so this is a comprehensive and generic gluing down template video. There's a few things I want to just cover slowly and carefully before we get started. You're going to want a ruler, and a small one like this is optimal so that you're not spreading glue all over the place. You're going to want a rag or a piece of paper towel. And cardboard selection is actually quite important. Thinner cardboard is easier to fold in that you get less of a open wound effect when you're folding the cardboard harshly. Now, sometimes, like, there's grades of cardboard within cereal boxes, and I can't even recommend a cereal company that makes good boxes, because even between different brands of cereal with the same producer, they'll have different boxes. So generally, if it's dark red, thick, and very hard, you don't want to try to use it. The gray stuff, quite light gray, is also thick, but it's quite soft, and it's a bit easier to use, but you do have that open wound sort of problem. Optimally, what you want to have is sort of a cross between both. So a little bit harder, but quite thin. And this cardboard I have here is pretty good, but the next batch of this that they come out with might have different boxes, so I just try to judge individually. You want to make sure that the glossy side is well sanded, and anytime you use any cardboard part, even if it doesn't have template parts glued to it, you want to use sanded cardboard. So always, always, always sand the cardboard first. It's way easier to glue to stuff. And if you have to end up painting a glossy bit here and there, then they will accept paint a lot easier if they're sanded. And generally it's for gluing, though. Now, any kind of part that is outlined in yellow, like this, you're going to need to glue to a different kind of paper. Now, this is index card paper, also kind of cue card paper would do. Cue card paper is a little bit thicker than index card paper. I'd actually probably recommend cue card paper, but they both will do fine. Any kind of semi-thick gauge paper will do. You just want it to be thicker than regular paper and much, much thinner than the cardboard that you're using. So, whenever I refer to glue as 2-to-1, 4-to-1, full strength, obviously full strength is obvious, it's glue first, then water. So 2-to-1 is 2 glue, 1 water. And that's very thin, which if you tried to go 1-to-1, it would be basically the same consistency as water and unusable for any project. So I use 2-to-1 and 4-to-1 and full strength. Those are the only 3 mixes of glue I use. Now, when you've got your template, you want to cut out small sections. And actually, you can see here the ink has run a little bit. If you don't wait a couple days, or you aren't careful about getting it wet, the template will smear a little bit. So just be cognizant of that, and keep it in mind that you want to remove the glue away from the paper rather than roll. You'll see what I mean in a second. Rolling the glue onto the paper and smearing the template. So once you're ready to begin, you just take small sections that are sort of handleable. The largest you'd want to use would be generally the size of the hull, or like, because it's unavoidable that will be that big. But generally, it's even better to go smaller than that if you can. Tiny is bad in its own way, in that you're smearing glue kind of all over the place and squashing parts into weird positions. So I'd recommend a medium size if you can cut out the template in a way that promotes that. And you just want to sort of not use a whole lot of glue, but you do want it everywhere on the template or on the cereal box. And you always want to glue to the glossy side so that you have two sides that are easy to glue to. One with paper and the other side that's natural cardboard. So you start the template on one side. You make sure it's lined up so it's not going to run into other bits of template or off the edge of the cereal box. And then once you've got that set up, you're going to sort of roll the ruler or slide the ruler over it until it lays down flat. And just remove the excess glue from the ruler and then do that to each side. And quite often you'll see like how would you put it, ripples of glue coming out from underneath it. And that's good because you're spreading the glue under the paper and getting any excess out from under there. And then once you've got that done, just carefully wipe away any glue that's excess and try not to get it, again, to smear your bit of template. So anything that is surrounded in yellow boxes like this, when you cut it out, you'll cut it by the black lines and just cut the yellow away. But you don't need to sand the cue card paper or index card paper. You can just put it directly on there. It's not a problem. You just want to make sure you don't use so much glue that it warps terribly. It's gonna warp some because it's so thin. But you don't want it to warp horribly. And just use the same method where you put down the part and then squeeze the glue out from under it, essentially. So you shouldn't need to use a giant amount of glue. I'll show you with one of these larger, more difficult to set parts how this works on a large scale. And then I'll pretty much just do a couple more and let you go on your own, because this is a process you don't need to see over and over again. I'm sure you can figure this out. So again, not using much glue. And spreading it out thoroughly. Now when I talk about glue, I'll try to say 4 glue, 1 water, but I fall back into the habit of just saying 4 to 1 quite often, or 2 to 1, and so keep in mind that that's what I mean, is glue first, then water. Okay, and so now that that's spread out very thoroughly, which is one of the most important things, you want to make sure, while there's not a whole lot of glue down there, that it's spread out even and very well. Because the last thing you want is bits of your template lifting off later on. You can see this river of glue coming out the bottom as you get close to the end. Anything that's lifting up, generally the paper's not warping, there's glue under there, and you can squeeze it out again with the ruler. Now if you put the bits too close to each other, you'll end up forcing glue onto other parts of the template you already have glued down. And I don't recommend really cutting these out really until the glue is dry, because you'll get glue all in your scissors, it'll make them dull, and the cardboard kind of mashes rather than slices when it's wet. So just have a bit of extra cardboard handy so that you can have some space between the parts that you're putting down, so that you're not forcing glue onto parts that you've already successfully completed. So I'll just do one more. Now if anything does lift off because of a lack of glue underneath it, You just kind of peel it. Let's see, this is a common tool I use all the time, is a scraper blade. You can kind of just peel it up if you have a section coming up with a blade, and then slip a little bit of glue under there, and then push it down again with the ruler. It's best to get that done now. It really can be inopportune moments, is the best way I can put it, that can happen later with your template coming apart when you really don't want it to. So it's best if you can affix it well now. And if you're finding the glue is a little bit watery, don't be afraid to add a little bit more glue. But I wouldn't go any more watery than 2:1. Also, please excuse me if I'm somewhat drawing the work towards me here. I'm not quite used to a stable filming platform. So bear with me in the beginning here, and I'll try to adjust my work to better suit the camera position. Now, there's going to be some warping of the cardboard as you go. Don't worry too much about that. When you cut out the parts, and especially when you make these folds and stuff, a lot of that disappears. Plus, the important parts we will be reinforcing with toothpicks to straighten them and flatten them. So, continue with that as your general principles. Cut out the parts, use fairly large portions, spacing, pre-sand, 2:1 glue, and you'll be good.